and the birds are singing. So look at that rainbow. I'll try to get it again here. Very beautiful rainbow. So every once in a while I'll be checking the time here by doing the turn. So as I was saying, with the COVID-19 topic in Saline County, Missouri, I was told that there was a care home up in Waverly, Missouri that had 28 or so, 24 or so tested positive and they recovered. And the thing is that, you know, we've already seen reports that some medical scientists have determined that or tested that the C19, I'll call it C19 for short, that leads to the disease in some cases of COVID-19, that this is an actual incubation period of up to 49 days. Another study I saw, I think, may have confirmed a period in the body of at least 3 months. In any case, the 14 days standard quarantine or test schedule to determine, you know, these people that have allegedly recovered, given those incubation times that I just mentioned of 30 to 90 days, makes it absolutely dangerous and quite unknowing of the reality of other medical doctors' findings out there in the world on the COVID-19, the C19 virus. And that's why it's frustrating, because also, you know, unless you've got hermetically sealed quarantines, actually probably better off to have an entire medical clinic or infectious hospital like they did in South Italy to separate and care only for the COVID-19 patients there in a unit with airlocks, with all staff, all medical workers having separate air respirators, hazmat suits, you know, able to handle the type of bioweapon that the new coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2, really is, C19, whatever name you want to choose. So that's frustrating to see, because also a lot of people, especially after seeing the documentary film, if you're lucky enough to have seen it yet, Plandemic documentary, I think it's like 2019, but I just saw it and yesterday, and it's already been removed from at least 3 or 4 video platforms, so it keeps getting removed. And what people question about the validity of the information that we're given, I get the most valid information published in advance, validated later, oftentimes on Michael Horn's theyflyblog.com. And there are several points in there about the need for hermetically sealed quarantines for COVID-19 patients, also about the incubation period being from 30 to 90 days, also the need for separate air respirators with hazmat style, you know, like for the suits that for medical staff, medical doctors, medical workers, you know, that would be appropriate for the level of biological weapon that the SARS-2 coronavirus is, or the C19 virus, as I'd like to call it, that leads in some cases to COVID-19. But given the question of the misintentional in some cases or intentional at some levels of disinformation or misinformation that's coming at us with that, the idea and the biggest concern is this, is that because China and the WHO didn't give the right or correct or full information early on in the global pandemic that we are now in, and I'm making this video on early May 2020, and because other governments are hiding the data, skewing the data, or in the case of, let's say, the state government of Florida, for example, I've read that they're not even going to release some of the data now or let it be known. So because of this, it's not even possible, and I was in a webinar just a day or so ago. There's a lot of unknowns with government officials in the webinar. On the panel discussion, they were saying that this is not going to be a short-term thing, and it just basically gave me the reminder that that's just too great of a rainbow up there. Let me see if I can catch that. This is huge. I don't know if you can. Let me see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. There's that, and it arches. Yeah, it's a little bit there above the tree. You can probably see all the way down there. That's huge. I'll come back. So it just really gave me the further reminder that reminded me about how that there's so many unknowns in this, and that's what they don't want to give the impression of in some cases, that they just simply don't know. But we're given this very accurate information that's again and again substantiated later on several points by medical doctors and scientists around the world, which was first published as at least back on February 25th, 2020 by theyfly.com or theyflyblog.com by Michael Horn. And so the problem with this whole thing is that the misintentional or intentional disinformation that's out there on the global pandemic that we're currently in, and much of it is because of financial, political, or religious reasons being skewed, lied about, or hidden, or falsified. This data is used in models that, in trying to plan, the quarantine, the lengths of the quarantines, the stay-at-home orders, things like this, which is completely off in many cases, which, according to the information that I'm getting from the most accurate source that I get it from, we're looking at minimum 2 years, but possibly up to 3 years before we get this pandemic properly dealt with. And secondly, because it is being handled wrong, for example, all the nations don't do it at the same time for the same length of time, 3 to 8 months, and so on. Because it's not being handled and done correctly, we've got a largely useless start on it with what measures are being put into place, because it will, in effect, the virus, the pandemic can strengthen, come back, and kill not only people of all age groups that come down with the COVID-19 disease, but also people that are strong and healthy with healthy immune systems. So instead of looking at the long term and the accurate information from sources like Michael Horn at theyflyblog.com, and instead of implementing it together in an international community, etc., we're looking at what is forewarned about a bigger devastation to the economy and more lethality, more lives lost. And when most people think that what the protocols are in place now in the United States and in most areas or many areas is already doing some economic damage, and when it's actually, from what I'm gathering from the information that I'm sharing and which is published by Michael Horn, is the reality that the long-term consequences will be more in costs of human lives and to the economy by not implementing the correct protocol. So we get into issues of the U.S. Constitution. A lot of people are talking about this in the United States now. I had a bit of a chat today with someone on the friends list on Facebook about that, and the point that I made is although this person had a lot of valid points, and I'm glad they posted, the point that I'm making is that why should we? And I understand the concept of viral load and social distancing and trying to flatten the curve, reduce the spread and all this stuff, but the point is, the bigger picture is that the governments haven't done this correctly in the first place, and in most cases, and because of that, when they let up off the quarantines and the lockdowns in one area or another, at one time or another, and sooner than they should, what's going to happen is that it will come back. More deaths will occur on the second or third waves of the global pandemic or national and also cost even more on national and global economy. That's the point that I made. The second point is that, and that's coming directly from the material from the Billy Edward Albert Meyer case out of Switzerland, UFO case. And the second point I was making is that thus we do have a U.S. Constitution which does give us, the right to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, First Amendment, Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, the right to defend ourselves and our loved ones, our life and our liberty. And there's the Bill of Rights, and we have the right to information. We have the right to make our own medical choices. We have patients' rights as medical patients, or about our medical decisions. All of these are enshrined and protected in one way or another, more or less, in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And this is why we do need to pay attention to that issue, because if our governments are going to lie to the public or misinform the public, either intentionally or through incompetence, or through intentional disinformation, for reasons of concerning or regarding politics, religion, or profit, then that's why we have a U.S. Constitution, and we have rights. We have medical rights. We have patients' rights with our medical decisions, and we have the right to free speech. We do have the right, the Second Amendment rights, and the Bill of Rights, and all those things that are U.S. Constitution assures every citizen of the United States of America. And those questions need to come up now, as well as what are our local, state, and federal authorities in the United States of America doing when you've got states like Florida that have called to stop the release of some of this data on the COVID-19 and all those. So I mean, what is that? So, and what it is everything to do with an American citizen being an independent thinker, doing their own research, and asking the right questions to themselves and to others and finding the answers. I've published from Muck Rock about the Sunshine Law, the Missouri State Sunshine Law, which I had started a lawsuit up with Arthur Benson against the state of Missouri. U.S. State judge at the time, Robert Ravenhill, was deposed in U.S. Federal District Court. Jack Vanderpool was a witness to that deposition at that time. And I had walked out of the lawsuit early on. The other party in the lawsuit, I'm the one that got it initiated. I'm the one that done the research. I'm the one that contacted Arthur and set up the first meetings and all that. But I walked away from the lawsuit because my purpose was met. Basically, the arrow was drawn back in the bow, and I let them take it from there, and the other parties. And they won that lawsuit, and it changed the Missouri Sunshine state law. So, I'm not one to just talk at a park bench outside of a radio cafe with a takeaway that's absolutely delicious with 3 cheeses and a rainbow that was just fantastically magical and beautiful above the trees there. That rainbow is now pretty much dissipated. Oh, there's a nice pink sky. You see that? There's Radio Cafe. I'm one who has taken action on matters like this in terms of with what the law and the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. court systems, both federal and state, provide. I've taken that action, and even though I walked away, I call it a victory. Exactly what I wanted to happen happened, and they had success in that. Thank you very much, Arthur Benson. So the law was changed in Missouri, and that law was recently talked about by one of the doctors I used to consult with, Dr. Richard Lloyd. I've shared a couple of his posts and his medical comments or research on my Facebook page. Also, the Freedom of Information Act, which actually was brought up, and I was actually asked to inquire about on the topic of Alexander Kartveli with the International Society of Alexander Kartveli by Layla Kartveli, the president of that association. When I was in a short, brief radio interview here some years ago on that topic. And so I'd sent that over to one government agency, and they basically come back saying that they didn't have the information I was looking for, but to check elsewhere. Donald Rumsfeld. Look Donald Rumsfeld up, the former Secretary of Defense of the United States, and his comments both on filing a tax return to the IRS. His comments are very interesting about that, and I think quite accurate. And I was on the plane once with Donald Rumsfeld, and his daughter's to my left, his son behind me. We flew into Baku over the Caspian. I would talk to his daughters for a little bit. They talked about, I said, "Is that Donald Rumsfeld up there? It sure does look like him." He says, "Yeah, that's him." And I didn't know these were his daughters till later. Well, he had come back, and he was just 3 feet in front of us. And I'm wondering, does he know who I am? Does he know that I'm the author of A Storm Warning for Israel, Spring-Summer 2007, that was published March 17, 2007 from Panama City, Panama, which predicted war in Israel, and went beyond and outdid a Russian general's prediction that it would occur around March 29, which I said there would be some turbulence then, but what it was, it turned out to be that there was the heads of the Arab states got together and basically threatened Israel and said, you give up some land or face war. Actually, war did take place that summer between Lebanon and Israel, and exactly around the time that I said, and exactly ended at precisely the day that I said it would in signatories on August 1st, 2007. That makes me an amazingly accurate, down-to-the-day accurate astrologer, Magi astrologer to be exact, and but not certified. And that was an amazing first published prediction. I've done at least 20 since then in public, hundreds more privately, that have proven to be extremely accurate on issues of everything from extremes in love, heartbreak, and childbirth, to peaks in the stock market, to war in Ukraine. 7 years to the day later, exactly on the day, 7 years exactly, I predicted the war in Ukraine, and published it about a month or 45 days before that happened, officially. And also a lot of geopolitical events here in Georgia, which have been amazingly accurate. So, about Donald Rumsfeld, I'd flown in with his family into Tbilisi that night, and I like to refer to that as I flew in with the American family. Because I talked to his son, and we looked out, we were talking about the Caspian Sea a little bit, and there was a thunder and lightning storm when we'd flown in from the Baku layover into Tbilisi, and his daughters was reading a book. It was called The Garden of Beasts. The Garden, or A Garden of Beasts, and it's a story about diplomacy and diplomats. Around the time of, I think it was just around the time before World War II Germany, and how basically something like they had to raise their own money to go about this cause or something. Anyway, that's the book that she was reading, and that's the day that I'd flown in with Donald Rumsfeld, both the youngest and oldest, 2 times Secretary of Defense of the United States of America. So, that's what's up with the information being accurate, being truthful, and then being suppressed. This movie that another guy came on and said, well, here it is. He gave what he believed to be a direct link, and it probably was a direct link to the movie Pandemic, or Plandemic, 2019 documentary, something like this. And so what happens is that I click on it, and there is a notice that it states, sorry, this movie doesn't exist. So that's the last update on that. I don't know if I'll be able to find that again or not. Surely we'll be able to find it, but as so far it's been taken down at least once on Vimeo, once on the so-called direct link of the direct site, supposedly, or one of them, if there is more than one, and also off of YouTube at least twice. Now the lights have come on in the buildings nearby. It's quite beautiful. And here in the park as well. So to kind of wrap this up, it demonstrates the point that there is not only misinformation and disinformation, but that we as American citizens with a U.S. Constitution as the founding document of the greatest democracy and one of the greatest nations of known, or commonly known, modern history, that document and those rights and the Bill of Rights and those freedoms, including the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, also Second Amendment rights. Those things should not be forgotten. Independent thinking, research, and doing one's own decision making, especially regarding patients' rights, especially regarding medical rights. I've had to call into the Missouri State Attorney General's office and inform them and remind them and educate them in a particular section and a particular person who answered the phone, which is a recording I have now set private and is on YouTube, that there is something called patients' rights. And when Fitzgibbon Hospital was not doing their medical referral services correctly, that was a question of patients' rights. And a couple of months later, they changed how they do things in that regards. So there was a time where they stopped calling and giving referrals on the family business for 5 months. That was about the time approximately I had published a couple of videos interviewing a medical doctor over here talking about the mother surrogacy in vitro fertilization program. She made a medical referral services business offer on that, had an event at the hospital here, one of the top hospitals in the country. And then suddenly we didn't get phone calls from Fitzgibbon Hospital on referrals for 5 months, and none that could work out for some time after that. I mean, just patients that could never in 10 million years get their needs met or meet the level of care that were offered at my mother's business. So I had questioned whether that was some sort of problem with that, what I had done over here in terms of the interview and the video. And so I had called the Missouri State Attorney General's office, and I had to ask about that situation. And so that was something that I had to educate the Missouri State Attorney General's office on and remind that person I was talking to on the phone about patients' rights. So we do have patients' rights, we have medical rights. And Amnesty International, which I'm a member of Amnesty International, they also have a video that educates people and reminds them and encourages people to keep up on their human rights in this time of stay-at-home orders or quarantines or different government measures around the world. In fact, I've been invited on and attended at least 3 different webinars now here in Tbilisi. 2 of them with the former Minister of Defense of Georgia, Tinatin Kitishvili. Also, yesterday was with several U.S. officials, including Lieutenant General Ben Hodges of the U.S. Army Europe, who was on the webinar in Germany. So, this topic of democracy was discussed in those webinars. Also, Brian Whitmore, who was for some years with Radio Liberty Europe, and the presentation that he gave, I agreed with probably 75% of what he said. It was really brilliant person, and was really privileged to see that. That was quite. It was quite good to learn what Brian had shared and report and to question on that webinar. So these are on the topics of democracy. These things should not be forgotten. There's a real risk to these principles that are enshrined in the documents of the U.S. Constitution that our founding fathers of the United States of America enshrined and agreed upon and signed upon, which resulted in one of the greatest nations of all times in known modern history, and that is the United States of America. So the information and disinformation and the accuracy of that and reporting on that is also very important, and that's why they invite journalists and media works with these folks that I just mentioned and so on the right platform in the right way, with the given access to discuss these kind of issues or to bring up these kinds of questions in respect to and care about freedom, liberty, and democracy. So that's my comments on that. And until the governments are working more together and coordinating the 3 to 8 months or the proper length of time on the proper protocols for the stay-at-home orders, the quarantines, etc., outside of essential businesses, etc., then you're probably going to be likely, according to information in They Fly blog, according to Michael Horn, we're likely to be dealing with the information he's publishing, which is coming from out of Switzerland. We're likely to be dealing with this from a minimum of 2 years to 3 years. So it's really important that people start to get it right. There is a doctor, I don't know if he's from India or just, but he's reporting out of America. He's on some interviews out of America. But he looks like he's from India. But anyway, he's reporting that some of the accurate information, almost as if though he reads the same source. But he is, I believe, a medical doctor. I should have his name, but I didn't catch it. So there are other voices out there besides the ones that I've mentioned, and one of them being a medical doctor that is pushing for this. And that is one of the questions I had on one of the first webinars, which I didn't get answered. But the question is when are they going to have the quarantines, stay-at-home orders, this kind of thing, all in unison with the international, with all the countries? That may or may not ever happen, but we are told that should happen in order to reduce the cost in lives and the longer-term, bigger, huge economic devastation from the current global pandemic on COVID-19. So instead of thinking short-term, instead of mistrusting all the information, which I understand it's difficult to do, especially when movies like Plandemic are just disappearing left and right from this video platform or the next video platform and from the original link hosting that, etc., etc. However, it is yet to be proven wrong. The information that has been published on the COVID-19 pandemic as early as at least February 2020, but it actually on some points goes back much further than that, that's being put out by Michael Horn on theyflyblog.com. Best I can do is refer you to that and leave you with the comments that I've left today. It is a privilege and a pleasure to have my question answered as delivered over to, as I submitted it to the webinar panel yesterday. Tinaton stated it to the Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's answered excellently at an hour and 7 minutes into the video, in the webinar. An hour and 7 minutes. Also his comments at 53rd minute or 54th minute. I actually had it at 56 on my own recording, but I'll have to go in and find out. But he had some excellent comments, of which I plan to review again later and take further contemplation on. So anyway, friends, thanks for watching. It's a beautiful, beautiful evening here, and hope you got to see the rainbows.